Let us come to the urgent question. Marion Fellows.
Mr. Speaker, to ask the Secretary of State for Business and Trade if she'll make a statement on the removal of Henry Staunton as Post Office Ltd Chair and wider governance issues within the organisation.
Minister, well.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Following a conversation with the Business Secretary over the weekend, Henry Staunton agreed to step down as Chairman of the Post Office. An interim will be appointed shortly and a recruitment process for a new chair will be launched in due course, in accordance with the Governance Code for Public Appointments. I will update the House when we have further details. The current chairmanship wasn't proving effective and we had a difficult decision over changing course or waiting and hoping it till improves. Given the challenging context of the Post Office and the importance of the role of the Chair, the Business Secretary took decisive action. I understand members would like more details around the decision, especially considering the Post Office is rightfully under heightened scrutiny at this time. I can confirm that there were issues beyond the handling of the Horizon scandal, but as you'd expect, I'm not able to comment on the specifics of individual HR cases. As the Business Secretary has said, Post Office governance is a priority for the Government. Post Office is a public corporation, and as such the Post Office Board has responsibility for the strategic direction of the company. While there was a clear need for new leadership of the Board, we continue to have confidence in the other Board members, who are experienced executives with a range of business expertise across the legal, financial, insurance, asset management and pension sectors, as well as 2 elected Postmaster non-executive directors. The Post Office faces unprecedented challenges and needs to work at pace to deliver compensation to the thousands of postmasters that fell victim to a faulty IT system, as well as continue the essential work to implement the necessary operational and cultural changes needed within the business. As such, strong and effective leadership of Post Office is a necessity.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Minister for his statement. It's concerning that the Secretary of State's move towards clarity and better governance at Post Office Ltd begins with being on a different page from Post Office Ltd as to whether Mr Staunton was fired or left by mutual consent. So I wonder if there could be clarification on that. Is it possible that Mr Staunton is a scapegoat in order to take the heat away from this government and those who came before it, who are the sole shareholders in Post Office Ltd? Back in July, the Minister for Small Business said in a debate on POL's management culture, through the shareholders' representative on the board, the government oversee the Post Office's corporate governance strategy, performance and stewardship of its financial and other resources. This is not the same as the chairperson. Are the government satisfied that the UK GI board representative has adequately fulfilled his oversight role? Indeed, has Tom Cooper been replaced since he stood down in May? It's not clear from Post Office Ltd's website. It's been clear that the governance model simply hasn't worked. The arm's-length approach used by successive governments has allowed scandal after scandal to fester. The Post Office network is in disarray. Financial redress to postmasters is far, far too slow and in some cases wholly inadequate. The remuneration package for sub-postmasters means that many are working below the minimum wage level and services are continuously being stripped away.
Scandalous.
Does the Minister have confidence that the removal of Mr Staunton will speed up financial redress for victims and bring about change in the management culture of Post Office Ltd? Back in July, Mr Staunton appeared in front of the Business and Trade Committee over the Bonusgate scandal, and in a debate at the same time, I asked the Minister for Small Business if he had confidence in the current management of Post Office Ltd. I received no meaningful answer, so has taken a TV drama for the government to take action, and how is this acceptable?
Well, I intend to. Thank you, Mr Speaker. As I said in my statement, and can I thank the Honourable Lady for her work, again, on the all-party group for post offices, does a tremendous job. Left us under, I think the statement we used is mutual consent, the phrase we use, mutual consent, but it's fair to say that the government exercised its right to remove the chairman. I think she can deduce from that what she will. This is not a case of allocating responsibility for the past problems of the post office. It's simply saying that we think we need new leadership going forward, and there are specific circumstances around this particular around the chairman in this situation that we felt that he wasn't the right person to lead the organisation at the board at this time. The shareholder representative for UKGI, she's right to say that's not the chair. It was Tom Cooper, it's now Lorna Grattan. Do I have confidence in her? Yes, I do. I meet her regularly and I have a high degree of confidence in her. The compensation is too slow. We accept that. There's a number of measures we brought forward prior to the TV drama, as she puts it, including the fixed sum award of £600,000 for overturned convictions. We've also introduced a fixed sum award for the group litigation order as well to expedite compensation. It's something I'm absolutely focused on a daily basis. I accept what she says about remuneration for postmasters around the country going forward. Part of this, of course, is about consumer habits in terms of where we shop on the high street. But I'm very keen to identify new sources of revenue, including through the banking framework, which is a potential lucrative opportunity, and indeed parcel hubs. That's something, again, we're working with. And in terms of confidence in the individuals, I say, of course, you take, I think, having been a board director myself for 30 years in my own business, you're only as good as your last game. So I think it's fair to say at this point in time we didn't feel that Henry Staunton was the right person to lead the board at this time.
We now come to Dame Priti Patel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I ask, given the government's role as a sole shareholder with regards to the Post Office and the associated liabilities and responsibilities that go with that, when will the Secretary of State for the Business Department make all the associated papers relating to Horizon and this entire scandal public, so that the victims in particular, and I think quite frankly the country, can now see where the responsibility lies for this, so that the government can take the right kind of action and support the victims as they seek compensation?
Well, I can thank her for her question and her work that she's done on this, and that's why we set up the inquiry, of course, in 2021 to undertake that work. Those documents are public and subject to public scrutiny. She may have watched some of the inquiry sessions, which are really very revealing about some of the conduct that happened at the Post Office. That will due to conclude by the end of this year, and then report probably sometime next year. And I think we'll be have a much clearer understanding at that point who's responsible. And as I often said at this dispatch box, that is the time to hold those individuals to account.
Shadow Minister Rushanara Ali.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Post Office Horizon scandal is one of the most insidious injustices in our country. It has robbed innocent people of their livelihoods, their liberty, and all too sadly, their lives. At least 60 postmasters have died without seeing justice or receiving compensation. At least 4 have taken their own lives. And 20 years on, they and their families are still suffering from the consequences and the trauma of all they have been put through. And the scale of the scandal is so vast, getting the right leadership in place at the Post Office is of paramount importance. However, to decide to eject the chair during the weekend with no real opportunity to get the details of the decision on the public record is unusual, to say the least. People need to know that removing Henry Staunton was a substantive, evidence-based decision if we are to have confidence in that decision. So can the Minister assure us that this decision was indeed substantive and not just as a result of a personal falling out between Mr. Staunton and the Secretary of State? The Minister has talked about setting a timeline in due course for replacing Mr. Staunton. In the context of what has happened and the Horizon scandal and the big challenges facing the Post Office, strong leadership is vital at this point in the process, and I hope he will be able to share as quickly as possible further information about the timeline and when the post will be filled. And what confidence can the Minister provide that this change will lead to wholesale culture change that is desperately needed to ensure this never happens again, especially given that Mr Staunton was not in the post office during the Horizon scandal. He's only served in this position since 2022. This, after all, has never been about actions of one single individual. And finally, Mr Speaker, the priority for us all, as has been stated in this House, is the fast-track exoneration of all remaining convictions and the delivery of rightful redress or compensation to all those affected submasters as quickly as possible. So will the Minister provide an update on when we will see further progress on those matters to make sure that we take urgent steps to fix the seismic damage of this scandal?
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Well, it certainly wasn't something we wanted to do at a weekend. There was a chance that this would come into the public domain by other means, which is why a conversation had to take place over the weekend. We didn't think it'd be right that an individual would hear about a potential course of action by other means other than the Secretary of State speaking to that individual. I think that's fair to say and the right thing to do. No, I don't know why she would have any evidence that this is some kind of falling out, as she put it. This is about governance issues, very serious governance issues about how the leader and the person who headed the board of that organisation. In terms of which are obviously confidential and HR issues, in terms of the timeline to replace, or as I said earlier in my remarks, as quickly as possible. We're looking at recommendations as we speak, and we should be able to report back to the House as soon as possible in terms of an interim and a permanent replacement. This wasn't about holding somebody responsible for past problems in the Post Office. This is about the governance of the Post Office going forward, which is why the mutual agreement took place for Mr Staunton to step down. And of course, we are working at pace to try and deliver the blanket overturning of convictions. We are keen to update the House as quickly as possible, and we should be doing that over in the coming days.
Jonathan Gullis.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. As a member of the Business Trade Select Committee, I was deeply concerned by Mr Reid, the current Chief Executive Officer of Post Office Ltd, who was unable to answer an array of very simple and basic questions, and in fact had not even appeared to have done his basic homework when it came to actually looking back at the Horizon scandal. Whilst now he was not the CEO at the time of this scandal, what confidence does the government have in Mr Reid as Chief Executive Officer to turn it around? And has he yet made public when the board minutes show that this was brought to the board's attention for the very first time? And if any board member was complicit in hearing that information, not acting upon it, what steps will the government take with lawyers to make sure they're held accountable?
Minister. Okay, thank you for his question. I was working on the Select Committee. I was there for that line of questioning that he took in the session itself. The Chief Executive committed to providing responses to the Select Committee. I'm not sure whether those responses have been provided thus far. There's a number of questions that needed to be addressed, and it's quite right that those answers are provided. I say our primary means of doing that, as far as the government are concerned, are through the inquiry. And obviously that's hearing very important evidence right now, and it will continue its work conclude its work by the end of the year, and report shortly afterwards.
SNP spokesperson Richard Thompson.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr Speaker. Surely, if ever there was a time to consider removing Mr Staunton from his post, it was after it emerged last year that bonuses were being paid to Post Office executives simply for doing what I think we would all expect of them to do, which was cooperating fully with the Horizon inquiry. And I think people will be forgiven for having the suspicion that ministers, when it comes to Horizon, are a bit like the Japanese moonlander, suddenly bursting into life as soon as a little bit of light is shone on them, in this case by an ITV programme. So I have two questions, Mr Speaker. Fujitsu representatives told the Business and Trade Committee a fortnight ago that they had a moral obligation to contribute to financial redress to the victims. So has the Secretary of State had any discussions yet with Fujitsu about how and when that might happen, as well as the size of the contribution they might make? And finally, Mr Speaker, in regard to the continued unexplained shortfalls in Horizon, will the Government commit to revealing how much in excess the Post Office claimed back from staff resorting to forensic accountancy if required?
Minister.
Okay, thank you for your questions. In terms of the bonuses were returned voluntarily, but anybody who received them for the sub-metric and indeed across the entirety of the inquiry bonus for the in terms of the Chief Executive. In terms of his point about the government picking up the pace because of the ITV drama. A couple of things I would say about that. We were putting a number of measures in place already. We'd put in place the Horizon Compensation Advisory Board, which has Lord Arbuthnot as one of its key members. The Fixum Award, introduced autumn last year. We were looking at advice on overturning convictions. Things were happening at pace in this area prior to dramatisation. But of course, we are public servants and we're members of the public. Of course, that we want to expedite things, and the impetus behind those things is at a raised level because of the public outcry. In terms of Fujitsu, yes, conversations are ongoing with Fujitsu. In my view, in terms of the best point to negotiate this is when we have all the evidence at our disposal, which won't be until when the inquiry concludes. We welcome the fact they have accepted a moral responsibility to contribute towards compensation. We'll take them at their word, but as I say, the negotiating at the right point is the right way to deal with that. In terms of any excess monies, the monies that came back from postmasters effectively into the Post Office accounts, it's a very important question. Questions we're asking now, and we hope to get answers to that in the near future.
Jack Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've recently spoken with a couple of my constituents whose parents were wronged by the Post Office Horizon scandal, and now they're being asked to provide invoices of more than 20 years ago to prove that they bought the Horizon system. These are records that the Post Office themselves admit that they don't keep. So would my honourable friend agree with me that it's right, and we must see, that focus is on those who've been wronged, and that the benefit of the doubt must be with those postmasters who are completely wrong?
Absolutely right, and it should not be the case that postmasters have to evidence something that doesn't exist, a document that doesn't exist, and the benefit of doubt should be with the postmaster. And if that, of course, it's fair to say, do you have documentation to support any claim that you are making? If that evidence is not there, then the benefit of doubt should be with the postmaster.
Chair of the Select Committee, Liam Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Leaving the Post Office rudderless right now, when people are literally dying before they get their redress, is not a situation we can put up with. So the key question for the Minister is, where is this bill that is going to expedite redress for those who are wrongfully convicted? Will he commit this afternoon, finally, to making sure that we can have pre-legislative scrutiny on that bill so it is as strong as it can be? And will he commit on the face of the bill for a hard deadline enshrined in law to make sure that the payments are made as rapidly as possible? Because quite frankly, Mr Bates and the other sub-postmasters who have been wronged for so long should not be made to wait for a moment longer.
Minister.
Okay, thank you for his question. I don't accept the premise that it's rudderless. The Chief Executive is still there. I spoke to the Chief Executive a few moments ago, but prior to this urgent question, Mr Speaker, as I said before, we are looking to appoint an interim as soon as possible and a permanent replacement shortly after that, and the daily work of the board will continue. In terms of our commitment to overturn convictions on a blanket basis, and I appreciate his previous constructive collaboration with engagement with our department, and I hope that continues. I'm very keen to engage with him in terms of the approach we take to that. These are legal matters that need to be considered carefully, but I had a number of meetings last week on this very issue, so I'm very keen to engage with him, but in a way that doesn't slow down the process of bringing this legislation forward. But he'll find us contacting him and knocking at his door in the coming days about how we go forward with that legislation. Can I just point out to him that Mr Bates's compensation is not related to overturning a conviction. Mr Bates was never convicted, so that's not what's getting in the way of Mr Bates's compensation, but it is getting in the way of around something like 900 other people, and they were keen to resolve that as quickly as possible.
James Wilde.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Will my right honourable friend take this opportunity to look at the Post Office's reported practice under the former chairman of making payments of just £5,000 under the Horizon Shortfall Scheme for distress and inconvenience to people it falsely accused of theft, when a similar claim made at an employment tribunal in the most exceptional cases is 10 times that amount?
Minister.
Well, can I thank him for his point? Just to be clear, that the Post Office, the schemes are run independently of Post Office. I think it's fair to say there are independent processes all the way through this. An independent panel assesses the loss. I think he's probably talking about the Horizon Shortfall Scheme. It's very clear that any tariffs that might go with payments are not a ceiling. They tend to be a floor, not a ceiling. But of course, people should be fully compensated for their loss, a financial loss and a non-pecuniary loss. That's a principle we've adhered to all the way through this. We're looking at recommendations of the advisory board, how we make sure that people who have been through those schemes have got fair payments. And say in the GLO scheme, there'll be effectively a minimum payment of £75,000, a fixed sum award, which but very keen to make sure we get the money out the door, but that compensation is fair and seen to be fair.
Jason Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Post Office bullied and threatened and lied to sub-postmasters, and yet there's this huge frustration that the Post Office has throughout the entire process of compensation, provided, as we've heard, tried to minimise payments and have used extra long and complex forms to try and stop making payments to sub-postmasters. Does the Minister have confidence that the compensation programme is truly independent and that sub-postmasters will get the full and fair payments that they deserve?
Minister.
Well, I don't accept a premise. I don't see any evidence where the compensation schemes have tried to minimise payments. What they've tried to do, and the people on the independent panel for the HSS included Lord Garnier, for example, a number, I think 7 or 8 KCs, very reputable people who are seeking to do the right thing. So I think we've got to be careful in some of our rhetoric around this. But of course we want to make sure people get full and fair compensation. That's why we implemented the Horizon Compensation Advisory Board, including Lord Arbuthnot and Kevin Jones and Chris Hodges and Professor Moorhead. Decent people, and want to make sure people get treated fairly. Full and fair compensation for what we want. That's what people will get.
Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Clearly, in the wake of the Horizon scandal, there's a need for a massive cultural change that drives Post Office management, particularly in their relationship with the sub-postmasters, who are, after all, private businesses under contract to the Post Office, not actually owned by the Post Office. So will he make sure that whoever is appointed to this job as chairman commits themselves thoroughly to this need to change the culture, and, if necessary, change other board members to make sure that we get the change that we all want to see?
Yeah, can I thank you for his question? It's a very, very good point. I think in the past, the relationship between Post Office Ltd and the sub-postmasters has not been where it should be. And it's very important that changes. There have been much work on this. 100 area managers have been appointed who helped to build that relationship. And I think some of the past conduct and past culture of the Post Office has changed. But we know it needs to change further. That's the job of the board. We need the right leader of that board to be able to do that, and hence the action we've taken over the weekend.
Barbara Keeley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It has been poor leadership and governance in the Post Office, as we're hearing, that led to the badly designed Horizon Shortfall Scheme, which other members have referred to. And I have to say to the Minister, there's been massive undercompensation for sub-postmasters like my constituent, Mr Pennington. For 10 years, Mr Pennington was forced to find shortfall amounts totalling possibly £100,000 because of the Horizon system. Mr Pennington and his wife had to use their own savings, they had to sell shares and even jewellery, they had to remortgage their house twice. The stress and worry of finding these shortfalls over 10 years was immense, and Mr Pennington had a mini-stroke shortly after selling the business in 2012 because he couldn't stand any more of this paying the shortfalls. Yet the Horizon Shortfall Scheme has paid out a paltry £1,500 for those 10 years of stress and worry, and compensated, it seems, only half the shortfalls. Even the promised tax top-up promised in November has not yet materialised. I've written to the Minister about this case, but what action can he promise now to make sure my constituent is finally compensated for these years of distress to him and his wife?
Okay, thank you for the question. I'm very happy to work with her on a particular case she refers to. We're very clear. People should get full and fair compensation, and that compensation is for financial loss and for other impacts, reputational loss and other. I'm setting out the position as it is. Now, of course, we're all concerned to hear people who don't feel they've been properly compensated. That's the reason why we've got the Horizon Compensation Advisory Board, which I've referred to a number of times, including Lord Arbuthnot that sits on that board. We're keen to make sure all those people have got fair compensation, but can see they have got fair compensation. We are looking at some of the recommendations around an appeal mechanism, for example. Very happy to look at that particular case within the context of this, but it's absolutely the case that people should be fully compensated for financial loss and for other impacts on their lives.
Mr Speaker, I welcome what my honourable friend has said, and given that the government has by default accepted the arm's-length body model for the Post Office doesn't work by taking this action, will he look again at perhaps the structure of Post Office Limited? And could he confirm on the record that given that the now former chairman left by mutual consent, that he did not receive or accept any severance payment?
Minister.
Yes, I can confirm that. There's no payment, no severance payment. I don't think it's fair to say we don't think the arm's length model works. I think clearly we have the right to terminate this the chair position, which is what we've done, and that's part of the current governance process. So I think, of course, individuals are important. Having the right individual leading the board is very important. We didn't think that was the case prior to this weekend. That's why we're taking the action that we have. We're very keen to appoint the right person going forward, which can help to make the cultural changes within the Post Office that we all like to see.
Liz Saville-Roberts.
The effects of the Horizon scandal and Post Office business practices are still hurting our communities. The Post in Nevin closed partly because staff no longer trust the computer systems, and I bet this is happening in countless communities. Yep. I've asked the Post Office to provide an outreach van in Nevin if, as appears very likely because I've asked them, no business at all is willing to provide the service. Last week, the Post Office said no. Will the Minister guarantee to the people of Nevin that this, the oldest and second largest town in Clean, will again have post services in the town?
Yeah. Well, very happy to take that point up with her, and I'm very happy to meet to discuss. It's very important, I think, our citizens, our consumers have confidence in the Post Office. That's my experience in my patch. When you get a closure, people are outraged, so there's definitely some confidence in it from the general public. The Horizon system itself is being replaced. There's never an essence or ever a case, as far as I know, that a customer has lost out because of the Horizon system. So, very happy to meet to discuss a case in Nevin.
Andy Slaughter.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Shepherd's Bush Crown Office closed in 2017. Hammersmith Crown Office closed in 2020 after 100 years. 4 sub-offices in my constituency have been temporarily closed for up to 10 years, with queues at remaining offices around the block at time and a lack of competition thanks to multiple bank closures. Will the Minister investigate why Post Office Limited lack commercial sense as well as integrity?
Minister.
Well, there are clear set criteria. I'm happy to look into any cases he refers to. There are clear set criteria that the Post Office has got to maintain. 11,500 branches nationwide, 99% of the population being within 3 miles of a post office. They are maintaining their requirements under those criteria. Very happy to talk to him about it. Of course, we're looking at making sure that the Post Office network, individual post offices, are sustainable in the long term. New revenue streams, including from the access to cash legislation that this government has put in place, and things like parcel hubs. We think there is a bright future for the Post Office, but I'm very keen to work with him to make sure there is in his particular cases.
Kirsten Oswald.
Mr Speaker, I recently raised serious concerns with the Minister that the UK Government is not putting enough effort into making sure that we do have a sustainable future for post offices. That was something that was of concern before the ITV drama shone the light that we now see. It's a challenge, and I don't feel that I really got an answer. So I'm coming back to this again. We really need to know that we have a plan, a clear, proper plan, to make sure that there is no further deterioration of the network and to help build it back up. People in places like Neilston, in my constituency, whose post office closed 2 weeks ago, or Clarkston, whose post office closed on Saturday, need these services. They're billed as temporary closures, but they're only temporary if someone has the confidence to take up the opportunity to be a postmaster who would feel that way now. So can he tell me what is his plan to reverse this issue and to make sure that we do have post office services for all our communities?
Yeah. Yes, well, I agree with you. We need sustainable post offices going forward, which is about revenue. There have been changes in consumer habits, which has caused a difficulty with, for postmasters in terms of a business level. As I said, government has legislated for access to cash, which is a new opportunity for post offices, of course. The banking framework delivers more revenue into those post office branches. We're keen to see that enhanced and the post office to be more ambitious in terms of that relationship, and that money flows straight into postmasters, into their individual branch P&Ls. And indeed things like parcel hubs are future opportunities, foreign exchange, many other opportunities. Very happy to discuss this matter offline if that would be helpful.
Andrew Gwynn.
Thank you. The reputational damage to the brand of the Post Office as a direct consequence of the Horizon scandal, and the Minister knows that my constituent Della Robinson was one of the 555 litigants who had their convictions quashed a couple of years ago. But that reputational damage has been massive. So what, looking to the future, is the Minister's vision for reinvigorating the Post Office as a great British brand?
Minister.
Well, can I thank him and for Della Robinson for her work. She's one of the trailblazers that was so important to getting where we are today, getting compensation to those people who have been affected. As I said to earlier questions on this, I believe the Post Office brand is not damaged. It's the centre of the Post Office that's damaged in terms of the people who ran it from the centre. I think we should all get behind our post offices, support them wherever we can, of course, but the brand itself, as I say, any closures that I hear from colleagues or in my own constituency, I know how the local populations are opposed to those kind of closures, which if some identify some kind of views in terms of the high esteem that people regard their post offices. But very happy to have a conversation with him if necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's been very concerning over the last few days to read that a senior UK government civil servant colluded with the Post Office to shut down the independent investigation by forensic accountants back in 2014, and that he did so with the full knowledge of the coalition government. Now that the Metropolitan Police are finally investigating possible criminality on the part of the Post Office and high-up employees, does the Minister agree with me that they should also be looking at the possibility of misfeasance in public office?
Well, certainly that's a concern to ourselves as well, at the government as well, and the inquiry is there to ascertain exactly who did what or who didn't do what and when they could have done something. And the Met Police will conduct investigations wherever they choose, of course, and take forward prosecutions wherever they choose. That's not something we seek to influence, although, as I said from this dispatch box before, I would welcome somebody being charged and taking criminal charges against somebody for what's happened in terms of this horrendous scandal.
Chris Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The family members of a terminally ill constituent came to my surgery in Cocker Hill on Friday. They were a shopkeeper in the Highlands. Like so many, they were caught up with unexplained shortfalls in Horizon totals. Although that didn't lead to criminal action, they paid up to avoid trouble, often borrowing from other sources in order to do so. So can the Minister tell us that there will be work done to ensure that we know exactly how much in excess the Post Office claimed through all Horizon errors? And secondly, can he tell me in general terms, how will he ensure that those who are terminally ill get the justice and compensation they richly deserve?
Well, I'm sorry to hear about his particular case. And so the most important thing we can do is get compensation to those people as quickly as possible. We have the first scheme that was implemented that sounds like it's the right one for his constituent, historic shortfall scheme. I presume they've made an application to that scheme and should be compensated accordingly. 100% of people who applied on time, but 2,400 people have received offers. 84% of people have accepted those offers. That is a route to compensation. In terms of the excess, that's something we're very keen to find out exactly where this money went and how it was dealt with when it did appear in some kind of suspense account. That's something we are working on, but certainly we're keen to make sure people are compensated. The most important thing we can do right now.
Tim Farron.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. When considering the governance of the Post Office Limited going forward, will he bear in mind the demoralising impact of the Horizon scandal on current and potential sub-postmasters, as well, of course, those people who were victims of the scandal itself? In our communities, we're fighting to return a post office to Shap and to Hawkshead, as he knows, because he kindly met with me to discuss those recently, and also to maintain a post office in Staveley. But we are being hampered by apparent inertia and administrative hurdles in Shap especially, which is the last thing we need. We need encouragement and not red tape. So is there a plan to proactively support current and potential postmasters so that we can maintain and expand our vital post office network in Cumbria's communities and across the country as well?
Yes, it was a pleasure to meet him. Happy to meet him again to try and expedite the situation if he's experiencing delays. Of course, there are checks and balances need to be gone through with any new postmaster application. It's good to hear people are coming forward. Very happy to work with him to make sure that situation's delivered as quickly as possible.
That completes the urgent question. We're now going to come to the statement.